Today we're gonna find out how far this new Hongqi E-HS9 with the updated 120 kWh battery pack can go on a full charge of battery. We're also gonna find out how fast it charges, and I'm going to give you guys my impressions of driving this 3-ton, 5.2 meter long, 7-seat electric SUV. And then at the end of the video, we are going to rank this car based on how much range it was able to achieve compared to the competition. But first, just a few stats about this behemoth of a vehicle. The E-HS9 is a full-size, full electric luxury SUV with dual electric motors, all-wheel drive, 551 horsepower, does 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 4.9 seconds, and in this version called Exclusive Plus gets the new 120 kilowatt hour battery pack with a usable capacity of 109 kilowatt hours. With a WLTP rated range of 515 kilometer, it is a huge improvement over the old car's 400 kilometer rating. But just how huge? That's what we're gonna find out in today's video. Despite this car being shaped like a brick, being tall and wide, and the front being completely flat, it is surprisingly quiet and serene in this cabin. We're on huge wheels and tires, going down the motorway at 120 kilometers an hour, and I barely have to raise my voice. This, at this price point, has to be the quietest and the most impressive luxurious electric car experience money can buy. I mean, this rivals something like a Mercedes EQS SUV. With this performance, it's going to cost you almost twice. It is that impressive. Consumption, though, not as impressive. There has to be a compromise somewhere. We've been on the road for about 20-25 minutes doing this range test, and our average consumption is at around 29 to 29.5 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. The weather's nice. We have a crosswind from the west, and it's around 12 degrees Celsius outside. So not the warmest conditions, but pretty decent conditions, completely dry. And yeah, that is the downside of this car, is that shape. Despite this car being extremely well insulated from the world around, it's not insulated from the shape of being a brick and not being that aerodynamic. We've just passed the halfway point and we're headed south on the E6 motorway back to our starting point. And our average consumption has risen a little bit, up to 29.9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, 30.0 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So the big question is, will the consumption rise or will it drop once we get back to our starting point? That depends on how accurate the wind map is, if we had a crosswind, if we had a tailwind, or if we've had a headwind. You can see that the car is set to 120 kilometers an hour there on the adaptive cruise control, but we're only going 108, 107, 106, 105, 104, and there's no car in front of us. Even though the car detects a car like this, what that car is detecting is that car all the way over there, and the distance is actually quite big. So it's only detecting a car. The reason it's reducing the speed, which is super annoying about this adaptive cruise control, and it doesn't matter if you're on auto steer, if not, we're currently on auto steer. As you guys can see, that green steering wheel is lit up and the car's now steering automatically. It's not therefore. That's not the reason. The reason is that as long as you have a little bit of steering lock, like now, the car is going to brake. So let's move over to the left lane where there's no car. So there's a Skoda Enyaq up there. But look now, no car. And it's just not going the speed we set it to. It's super annoying. And then once the road straightens up like this, it's going to increase the speed. So let's move over into the right lane now. I'll show you the same thing. Maybe, yeah, like this. Look at this. Look at this. It's so annoying. Just keeps going up and down and up and down. 112, and look at that. And then it's straight. And then the speed increases. That is super annoying. And it decreases the speed by like 10 to 12, 15 kilometers an hour. We were going 105, 15 kilometers an hour lower than what the speed was set to. And the road was barely turning, like barely turning. This is super annoying about the adaptive cruise control on this car. And it doesn't matter if you have auto steer on and off, it's still gonna do the same thing. I don't understand why Hongqi have programmed their adaptive cruise control this way, because it's just almost useless. Okay, we're now back at where we started, and we're going to connect to the charger and see what kind of charging speed we get after a few hours driving on the road. So this car does not have preconditioning, no preheating, and that is what we do in this test, even though the car would have it. So while I'm connecting here and we're waiting for the car to initialize, I just want to give a huge thanks to today's video sponsor, Recharge, which is the largest charge point operator in the Nordics, and is the charger where we're connected to now. In Norway, Sweden, and Finland, they have more than 4,000 charging points, which is just completely insane bonkers. So if you want to support the channel, go to the link in the description box down below and find out where your closest Recharge charger is. So we're now connected, the car initialized and started ramping up speed super quickly. Look at this, guys. Within a few seconds, we were up to the peak we reached at 36% state of charge, which was 102.3 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So not the fastest. This car has a claimed peak of 130 kilowatts, but that is probably down low, lower in the state to charge, and not at 36%. Okay guys, now for the results. So we started today's test with 97% stated charge, and after a test loop, we were right back here at the chargers where we started today with 36% stated charge left, and an average consumption of 30.2 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. This car has a gross battery capacity of 120 kilowatt hours and a usable capacity of 109 kilowatt hours. We take that number, divided by the consumption, and then subtract 3% in heat loss. That gives us a theoretical range under today's conditions of 350 kilometers, which on the surface actually looks pretty good and puts this car almost at the same range as the Mercedes EQS SUV 580 4MATIC we tested earlier today. But under closer inspection, we can see that the average speed today was a bit lower than we usually have in these tests, probably because of the adaptive cruise control in this car slowing down a lot during the turns. Yeah, it's pretty insane. So our average speed was actually below 110 kilometers an hour, and usually is somewhere between like 113 and 116 measured real world average speed. So that may give this car lower consumption than it would if we went a little bit faster. And then compared to that Mercedes EQS SUV, which also has quite low average speed because that test was done under completely different conditions, the temperature also was a lot lower when we did that test. So I don't think that this test and that test can be directly compared. I think if this car drove a little bit faster, we would have had higher consumption. That 30.2 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers is already pretty high, but I'm guessing our average consumption would have been a little bit higher and thus a lower range, maybe 340, 335 kilometers. It's still a huge improvement over the old car with the smaller battery pack. When I did the same test then in winter, back in February, it was a bit colder, but this car barely cracked 180 kilometers of real world range on the motorway. So I have to say, even though the consumption is pretty high, because this is a big car, even though the average speed wasn't as high as I was hoping, the results are still pretty good and a huge improvement over the old car. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please drop me a thumbs up down below. And for more car content, as always, please subscribe. See you guys later and goodbye.